Today on the Transplant Helper, I'm going to be answering several viewers' questions, all surrounding the potential need or maybe even necessity of raising funds from our family and friends, maybe even strangers, to assist with our medical expenses. Should we be using something like GoFundMe or possibly going in an entirely different direction? That's what we're talking about today, so go ahead and stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome to Transplant Helper today. My name is Jim Burrell. The question comes up quite often in the work that I'm doing here along with the transplant community. Jim, should we be taking outside funds or resources from individuals in order to assist with our personal medical expenses? Well, there are probably tons of opinions on that. I'm just going to be giving my opinion, and then toward the end of this, giving you some facts about ways that you can go about raising funds if you decide to do so, as well as in the very end of this, I promise, if you stay to the end, I've got a solution for you that may not involve raising funds from anybody. So you're going to hear about that when we get down to it. But anyway, with that being said, personally, Jim Merle, I believe it's okay to take or to raise money from other people to help with your medical expenses. And the reason I say that is I kind of take a biblical approach to this, that it's more blessed to give than to receive, and that anytime you allow people to bless you, to them it becomes a blessing. I know that is the case. Every time in my life I've ever made a choice and decided to give to someone else, even though it may be giving out of something I really don't have myself, I have found giving to them to be a huge, tremendous blessing to me. And then more times than not, it's almost like the blessing comes back to me in some way. So I think it's okay to do that from a moral perspective. From another side of that, if you're the patient receiving that assistance, please try your best to just put away your shame, put away your pride, and go ahead and take this assistance. When we're talking about medical care bills for anyone, but especially for us as transplant patients, we're generally talking about monstrous, enormous, humongous medical bill potential there. The types of bills that nobody can pay, okay? I don't care if you're independently wealthy or if you just had a great career that's really paid itself off to you. That all changes in an instant when you start being billed for what could be the total of $1.4+ million, say, for example, for a heart transplant. So you being able to get funding from some other resource is probably where you're going to end up. Now, the first thing you should do is make sure going into this, if you can, that you've got a good resource as far as your insurance. That's an obvious. You know, really, I don't know if there's any programs out there or available to us as far as transplant goes that won't approve us unless we have some kind of proof of income or proof of insurance in the beginning. But nonetheless, make it your duty and your job, or at least delegate someone in your family and make sure that they check out your insurance company if you have one, or get an insurance company if possible, and try to make sure that they're going to pay for the vast majority of the expense, and they're going to make it easy on you, at least as far as the actual direct medical bills themselves. So check out your insurance. Now, once you get through doing that, there's no doubt, no argument that most insurances are going to leave you with some kind of a balance, okay? So you're going to have large balances. You know, you take a balance on $1 million and you may be stuck with $100,000 of that, and that's still overwhelming to the vast majority of us. So what are you going to do about that? Well, first of all, you can pay incrementally on it. There's no doubt about that. Just start paying out of pocket as best you can. Don't sweat it. Don't worry. And I've had tons of videos already considering the possibility of maybe threatening you with debt collections or maybe being sent to debt collections. I'll link them up here in the corners. You can check those out. In the beginning of that, I would say don't even sweat it. Just let it happen. If it happens, it happens, and you do your best, and that's all you can do. Now, when it comes down to a little bit more than that, and that really goes beyond the medical expense itself, there are other expenses that go along with transplant. You know, oftentimes transplant centers call on us to maybe remain within so many minutes of the hospital for 6, 12 weeks after transplant, even if things go well. And of course, for most of us, like it did for me, that required me being in an entirely different city, over an hour away from my home, having to get an apartment there, having to have, you know, expenses there, as well as trying to take care of everything back home. So it gets pretty expensive, and you got to factor that in. And that's one of the good places where family members, friends, co-workers, churches, even strangers can kick in and help you out with that. And whether or not they do that through a GoFundMe or just direct donations, of course, putting on that for tab and checks if they write them, this is for medical expenses, and then you using it for that, that's fine. Just make sure they understand what they're giving to, to, and you understand that it needs to be used at least morally for that reason. So I think it's okay to take those funds. I think it's okay to drop your pride and accept those funds. It's just something that sometimes needs to be done. Now, if you'll watch all over the internet now, especially when you're scrolling through Facebook, there are tons and tons and tons, I guess millions of people maybe by now, out there who are using the platform, the crowdfunding platform, GoFundMe. And they're not the only platform out there that does this. However, I will say this, I think GoFundMe probably does it as well as anybody else. They're probably the most well-known crowdfunding platform. And GoFundMe is a place you can turn to. You know, if you're not into, or if you don't have the help, and it would take physical feet to say have a 5K run on your behalf, or, you know, sell top products, t-shirts, have a bake sale, all the traditional methods that we used to use to raise funds for someone who is in need. If you're not able to do that, GoFundMe is an easy option. When you upload a video or a couple of photographs, write a paragraph or a summary about what the need is and how that need can be met, bam, in just a few minutes, you're signed up totally for free. And if people want to give, you start sharing that out on social media, or other of your family or friends share it out for you on social media. And here you go. You start raising some kind of funds. But there needs to be some caution there as far as GoFundMe. And again, I think they're probably one of the better ones out there. They are totally free to use, at least on the surface. But keep in mind, once you raise funds, there will be a 5% fee, processing fee added to those funds. So if you raise $1,000, they're going to take 5% of that and put it in their pocket for themselves. And when you really calculate all that they've done, basically setting up a website for you, basically monitoring this thing, basically taking the funds, protecting the funds, guaranteeing the funds, it's worth 5%, okay? So don't sweat that, but do know that whatever you raise, they're going to take 5% off the top, period. In addition to that, when it comes to making transfers, and you can ask for transfers at any point if you've got a goal set up and you're raising this amount of funds and there's a need that comes up today, you can have some of your funds transferred into your checking account to be used for an expense. You can do that anytime, but keep in mind they're going to charge about 3% generally as an electronic transferring fee there. So there's some processing fee in there. So total, you're probably going to pay 5% for the platform itself, 3% for the transfer themselves, so 8% total. Just be aware that that's a possibility. In addition to that, even though and in spite the fact that GoFundMe has on its website, and you can scroll through and find this, a disclaimer of their policy saying that most of these funds are not going to be taxable. You're not going to be taxed for these funds because they're gifts, they're medical donations and gifts. Be very careful with that, because there are limits to that, and there is the possibility out there that at the end of the day, that whatever monies you raise could be spotted by the government and taxed, okay? So that information, they're going to send you a 1099. That information is going to show up on your tax, or I should say that information is going to be known to the IRS, and it needs to show up on your taxes too, so that you can say, okay, I admit I got the money, and be ready to prove that it was medical donation, and be ready to prove how it was used. And that's going to be the key. Everything that's donated, GoFundMe is going to handle for you, kind of process. But when you go to pay a bill with that, if you say write a check to the hospital, write a check to the doctor, if you've said it's for medical expenses or whatever, have some receipts to prove that, because if you can't prove that this gift went to serve the purpose that it did, you could be taxed. And I'm not a tax lawyer. I'm not an accountant. I'm not anything like that. So please don't take that as 100% advice. I'm just saying be aware. So they're going to take about 8% off for fees and transaction fees. They're going to turn around and potentially 1099 you, and then you might have to pay some taxes. Now that's GoFundMe. And I think, again, it is a pretty good platform, a pretty useful platform. They'll pretty much allow you to raise money for anything. But the key to all of it is be totally honest when you do, and be sure that you make good documentation. Now, I promised you in the beginning of this, if you'd hang on, I'd give you a solution that you perhaps can use that's going to be better than fundraising, okay? And it won't cover things like the fact that you need an apartment. It won't cover the fact that, you and your family need to eat or pay your bills back home. There still may be reason for that. I'm talking about strictly for the medical bills. Let's just use the example of that $1.4 million expense surrounding my heart transplant. How do I pay for that? Well, the answer is, I didn't, okay? I didn't. And the reason being is, if you'll check into this, and please do it. I've had other videos about this, so you may have heard me talk about it before. But anyway, if you will check into your hospital's policies and such, most facilities, especially bigger facilities, which are more than likely transplant centers anyway, most facilities have what they call a financial assistance program. UAB Hospital calls it charity care. And what happens with the financial assistance or charity care programs is that you go in and fill out applications and you turn in budgets, that sort of thing, proving your income, that kind of thing. And you apply for that. And what they're willing to do is to turn around and to take whatever your insurance companies didn't pay or whatever wasn't already paid out of pocket, and they're willing to turn around and allow a charity to turn around and pay that for you. In all truth, they're pretty much just writing it off. But they're claiming some charity or some charitable organization is covering this for you. And they can cover up to 100% of your bills if you apply and if you qualify for that. And that's apply and qualify. That's what's important. Now, how do you do it? Well, it's generally just paperwork, okay? Tons of paperwork, mind you, but it's generally just paperwork. And generally, to be honest with you, the clearance process of this comes down sometimes to just, did you turn in all the paperwork? Because I talked to a few different people, friends of mine who work in the charity care side of things at UAB, for example, and they said, look, most people are turned down because they won't get the paperwork. When we ask for previous year's tax refund, I can't get it. Previous year's income tax filings, copies, I'm not even smart this morning. They don't turn them in. We ask for a letter from the doctor saying that, they were medically disabled for this period of time. That's why they can't work. They don't turn it in. We ask for income statements. They don't turn them in. We ask for, listing of assets and bank account balances. They don't turn it in. That's the clearance usually, that they didn't turn it in. If they had turned it in, what they might find out and generally do is that they do qualify for some kind of financial assistance, which will cover the balances left that insurance companies didn't pay. You just have to do the footwork. You've got to get it done. And whether or not you can do that physically or, again, a family member does it, it needs to be done. And it's worth it, okay? Having a balance paid up to the 100% is absolutely worth it. In addition to that, this is really special, oftentimes these charity care programs are proactive. And what I mean by that, they may be proactive like UAB is out to 6 months. So you may have, ongoing doctor's appointments and they're going to start covering some of that stuff and helping you with that. But you may also have bills that are up of 6 months old that they're going to reach back and pay for you too. So imagine you're a heart transplant or a lung transplant or whatever transplant patient, you're 4, maybe 5 months out of transplant, and you've got all those humongous, enormous bills there. You apply for charity care. Not only do they start paying and assisting you now, they reach back 6 months and grab those bills up to 6 months and pay them off. That's the way to go. Now, will you still need something like a fundraiser or GoFundMe for personal expenses? Yeah, you will. But the truth is, don't go off paying your medical bills, the actual medical bills, without checking into this first. Making sure your insurance company's established and paying its part, and then making sure that if it's at all feasible, that you can receive some kind of charity/financial assistance because you may qualify. Now, somebody says immediately, Jim, I'd never qualify. I'm a hardworking person, or my wife works hard, or my husband, and they make decent money, and we'll never qualify. That's just for those poor folks that don't want to work. No, it's not. You'll learn that these financial thresholds are pretty high to begin with. You'll also learn, and it's what I'm telling you, they're not just based on income. They're based on income versus expense, okay? And you have expenses. You got everyday expenses, house, car, phone, clothes, food. You got all of that. But now you've got medical bills tied to that. So see what happens? My income's here. I was riding along, breaking even, Friday to Friday like everybody else. And then I got medical bills and I'm sunk. They take that into account. They're very kind. They're very concerned about that. They're very understanding. Remember, you're getting this assistance from the hospital who's billing you. They know about all the bills. Just be honest, turn in your work, and let them make the decision. And that's what I told someone one time when I was applying. She was like, I don't know that you're going to qualify. I don't care what you think right now. I didn't say this mean, but I didn't care what a person thought or assumed. I said, just give me an application. Let me fill it out and see how it works. I qualified. 100% care, coverage, 6 months proactive, cleaned everything up, made my life so much better. So I hope this has helped you out in some way. I've probably been rambling a little bit, but in general, don't be ashamed to take assistance from someone else. Allowing them to bless you will be a blessing to them. Don't be afraid of some of this crowdfunding. Just be careful with it and aware that there will be some fees and maybe potentially some taxes, worst case scenario, but you can get that all leveled out. And then make sure that you've done what you can with a hospital, because I promise you, in more cases than not, especially with our bills, you can get some assistance, and you need to access that, okay? I appreciate you joining me today. If this program has helped you out in any way whatsoever, if you liked it, go ahead and give it a like. Hit the like button. That encourages me as well. Also, go ahead and share this video out to your friends, whomever might be helped by it, because a lot of us end up in these positions and we just need the help. So share this out if it would help someone you know. And while you're here, you're already here anyway, hit the big subscribe button beneath the video if you're not already subscribed. Go ahead and hit the bell notification up beside that, because, hey, that allows you to be notified when I put out content, which generally is not even related to this, but is related to advocating, educating, and motivating you as a transplant patient. Thank you so much for what you do for me. Thank you so much for being so great. And until next time, all of you, please stay stronger, friend.